The Las Vegas Raiders were yet again a disappointment this season. We saw a disappointing start, a midseason coaching change, and now the team has officially hired Antonio Pierce to be their new head coach for the 2024 season. It's not all bad, though, Raiders fans. I have found 5 easy steps to change your team. This is the ultimate rebuild, Las Vegas Raiders. Step number 1, the team must hire Marvin Lewis as their defensive coordinator. Now, I know that this isn't the sexiest or flashiest hire, but it makes perfect sense. To start, Antonio Pierce is a rookie defensive head coach. In the day and age of the offensive geniuses in the McVay and Shanahan trees, the Raiders, as has become customary for this franchise, are zagging while the rest of the teams in the NFL are zigging. They are going with a defensive head coach who was in-house, and the players have rallied around him. Marvin Lewis is the perfect person to mentor a player coach like Antonio Pierce. To start, Marvin Lewis has had high level success as a defensive coordinator. He was the defensive coordinator for the Super Bowl winning Baltimore Ravens, one of the most lauded defenses in all of NFL history. At the same time, Marvin Lewis was also a reasonably successful head coach who lacked playoff wins, but also was very relevant for the Cincinnati Bengals in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Antonio Pierce is going to need as much help as he can get to sort of learn what it's like to be an NFL head coach. And he needs to also embody what the Raiders mentality is, that tough, rugged, gritty identity that has sort of escaped this franchise over the course of the last 2 decades. He is going to have to go all in, if you will, on this identity in Las Vegas because let's face it, there are a lot of distractions in Vegas. There's a lot of other franchises and sports teams that have been relatively successful. And for the better part of 2 decades, almost 3 decades, the Raiders have been sort of a laughing stock. And that is not what this team was. This team was a feared defensive force with a hard-nosed mentality. And I believe that Antonio Pierce, if he hires Marvin Lewis, can get back to that rugged identity that has eluded them over the course of time. But in order to do so, the team must hire somebody with that type of experience, and I believe that Marvin Lewis is the perfect candidate for this position. Step number 2, identify your foundational players. Antonio Pierce is in charge now of all facets of the game, but there are 2 players in particular that he needs to focus all of his attention on. On the defensive side of the ball, that player is none other than edge rusher Max Crosby. Crosby has been a vocal supporter of Antonio Pierce, going so far as to saying that he would weigh his options if the team chose not to retain him. Good news, Raiders fans. You did so. The front office listened to their star pass rusher and have moved forward with Antonio Pierce. But that's half the battle. The other half now is that Pierce must craft this defense in his image. But what better way to do so than to funnel your message through your arguable best player on the team, Max Crosby? Crosby being the best supporter of Pierce may be a blessing in disguise, although it may have ruffled feathers at the time and made all of the headlines for the sports talk shows. Crosby is a rare elite talent in the NFL. There are not players like him that grow on trees. You must lean heavily into the identity of who he is, and what Raider better exemplifies the mentality of tough and rugged than Max Crosby. The second player that needs to get a one-on-one talking with Antonio Pierce immediately is wide receiver Davante Adams. Adams had a very up and down year, and throughout the entire season, it always felt as though something was off with Adams. He was more vocal than usual. Unfortunately, though, more negative than usual. He came to the team to reunite with Derek Carr, but this past season, the team moved on from Derek Carr, and Adams was vocal about his displeasure with this move. That being said, on top of this, he wasn't exactly having the most star-studded Davante Adams-like season. Wide receiver is a dependent position, no doubt, and the Raiders' quarterback situation was far from ideal. However, Adams did not play inspiring football, and I believe that there's a morality problem there. I believe that Antonio Pierce must mend this fence and create a better relationship for this star player. I believe we can see an immediate return to form for Davante Adams because we have a body of work that is unlike most receivers we see in this league. Antonio Pierce must funnel his message through these 2 players. If he can do so, I believe that the Las Vegas Raiders can contend immediately with the top teams in their division. Step number 3, Sign defensive players. There is only one way to win in this league if you are a defensive head coach. You have to have an elite defense. Pierce already has some high level pieces on this defense, but there are opportunities to improve in this free agency period. We have a crop of pass rushers that could be available. The likes of Brian Burns, Josh Allen, Chris Jones, Justin Matabuike, and Daniil Hunter, just to name a few, are all potentially available this offseason. If they can sign just one of those elite level pass rushers, we could see this already good defense become even greater and even potentially crack the top 3 to 5 defenses in the entire league. A good defense is a defense that can get to the quarterback and get to them often. If you can disrupt what the opposing quarterback wants to do, you are already levels ahead of what other teams can do. The NFL is increasingly an offensive game, and rightfully so. Whether it's player safety, rule changes, etc., we are seeing a heavy reliance on offensive driven teams. So when you have a defensive head coach, you have to do that all in. You cannot halfway have a decent defense and a bad offense if you're going to lean heavily on a defensive head coach. You have to be top of the line. And in order to do this, you have to build a team that does that. The easiest way to do so, lure some big time free agents over here to change the culture of your team. So maybe you don't want to build this team through the pass rush, and that's okay. There is potentially Antoine Winfield Jr. available on the market, who currently plays for the Buccaneers. Now, this team would be crazy to let him go. But if he is available, you could add an elite level young talent to an already decent secondary with rising star Nate Hobbs. If you can get one of these potential free agents to come here, or even more, this defense could be elite immediately. But you have to go all in. Steps 4 and 5 are so big that I believe they need to be combined into one super step. Trade up in the NFL draft and select a franchise quarterback. The team currently selects 13th overall, but I believe that there are two potential suitors for a trade up. Number one, the Chicago Bears, who select first and ninth, and number two, the Arizona Cardinals, who are currently the fourth pick in the draft. I believe the Bears will be hard pressed to move off from the number one pick, so let's talk about the number 9. Would the Raiders be willing to move up just 4 steps in order to secure a franchise quarterback? Now, there are some inherent risks here. To start, is the quarterback you want available at this pick? And are there people in front of you who could potentially take this player? I believe the safest bet would be to go to the Arizona Cardinals at pick number 4. You need to take the remainder of the following players: Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jayden Daniels, or Michael Penix Jr. This team is in Las Vegas. You need a star franchise quarterback. If you trade up in the draft and take a top 5 selection at quarterback, this immediately gets you all the fancy Vegas headlines you need. But it also does one thing that's strategic. It resets the quarterback salary. You can finally get out from the Aiden O'Connell, Jimmy G trap that you have laid for yourself, and you have available money for the next 3 to 5 years to build an offensive weapon around him. But in order to do so, you have to do the Vegas thing and risk it all. Trade up in the draft, give up whatever you have to get, and get your franchise quarterback. If you can secure this player, you could immediately contend within your division and maybe even conference. Now, in this scenario, we could potentially see 4 straight quarterbacks go off the board in the NFL draft to start, which would make all talking heads explode and every sports show regurgitate this information for years to come. But in order to do so, Vegas needs to do something that they don't often do: win a headline. Not negatively, positively. Win a headline. Make a move with your rookie head coach and show the world that this isn't just the same old Raiders that we've had. Go get your franchise guy and show the world that you can change and are willing to do what's necessary in order to change.